Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 183. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me tonight's been a long time since he's been on the show. Mr. Natty turning the black bird sugar of this YouTube shit. Also joining us, Gus from Corruption and Boxing, Daniel from the Inscriber, Jacob from Jab Hook. What's going on, fellas?
What's up? What's up?
Yeah. Good evening.
What's up?
You may, Gus, I can't really hear you. You may have to reboot your system or something. I'm hearing a bunch of background noise. So mute your mic. You have to log off and come back on. Okay, there you go. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report, live YouTube show, as well as podcast and blog discussing all things boxing. If you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, blog page is the best place to go to, P4P Boxing Report. Uh, .wordpress.com. You check to the right of the page, you'll find links to our pages and channels on YouTube, G Plus, Twitter, Tumblr, as well as where to listen to us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, Player FM for those in the UK, as well as Mixcloud. Let's get this show started tonight. Last week had a heavy emphasis talking about Superfly event that took place in at StubHub and Carson on HBO. Going to recap that now. I see Bo from Truth and Facts has also joined us. Thanks for joining the show tonight, Bo. The fall of Chocolatito, fellas. The highlight of the main event of Superfly was Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez attempting to regain his WBC title at 115, fighting SSR, Srisaket Sor Rungvisai. And Chocolatito, he just didn't lose. He got beat down. He got crushed. He got bodied, getting knocked out in four. SSR took it to him from jump. It was obvious that Roman too small, SSR too big, too strong, too powerful in this fight. I didn't like Roman's disposition from jump in the lead up. And I certainly didn't like what I saw in the ring. Since it's been a long time since you've been on here, Natty, I'm going to you first. The level of shock witnessing what went down in the main event.
Well, to me, it wasn't shocking per se. I expected him to get the victory, but I wasn't shocked of what happened, just because of what I saw in the first fight. I know there was controversy in the first fight, but I saw the Thai fighter winning the first fight. Close decision. I had him maybe winning by a round or two, you know what I mean? But I think the right guy won the fight. In real time, I was watching it with Nauta, me and Nauta, and EJ was watching it, and I was hyping, you know what I mean? In real time, I thought Chocolatito won, but when I watched it by myself and scored it, the right man won the fight, in my opinion. And what it was is, even though Chocolatito was doing well with his activity, you could tell that every time this guy punched him, you know what I mean? Every time this guy punched him, it was like it affected him. It affected him. Every touch this guy hit him clean with, it affected him. It kind of like, I don't know if you ever played Knockout Kings or any of those games, and you try to put the middleweight or the welterweight against the heavyweight. You know what I mean? The middleweight or the welterweight is lighting the heavyweight up, but every time the heavyweight touches the middleweight, your power goes down halfway, and that's what I was seeing in the first fight. You know what I mean? And in the second fight, I expected it to be more. I expected Chocolatito to be affected by the guy in the same way and fashion, because it just seemed to me that the guy is so much bigger, so much stronger, and it's only so much weight classes you could go up when you have Chocolatito's frame. You know what I mean? I know they ranked him in the pound for pound, and he was expected to do all of these things. And they wanted him to continue to move up and prove his ability, but there's only so much you can move up, man. And I think he just moved up one weight class too far. The guys up there are just too big for him. You saw the writing on the wall against Cuadras, even though I think he edged out the fight against Cuadras. But you saw him in that fight, and you saw how he did with a much bigger guy, and he wasn't as effective. His power didn't carry, and once the guy stops respecting your power, I mean, it's all she wrote, and it's what happens, man. I don't think he was overrated. I know a lot of conversation is going on about he was overrated. He's a bum. He was exposed. I just think he went up one weight class too high.
I go to you, Gus. I hope your mic issues are fixed. You was hitting me up about this fight on Skype. Not only just talk about the fight, and like I said, I didn't like the disposition of Chocolatito coming in, his attitude in the lead up, and even in the ring walks. It seemed like, you know, it wasn't, something was missing. But also, I know you had some issues in terms of the HBO commentary.
Yeah, the the build up. I know Mr. Honda was keen on making changes, so Roman reverted back to earlier trainers who oversaw his career early on in Japan when he won the be a minimum title against. So that was a slightly different Roman, but when you've subsequent fights in that sort of high risk and attritional style, it's certainly difficult to sort of implement the changes that he needed to make, and especially, you know, the sort of tail end and probably the end of his career. Conversely, you know, Srisaket, as we've heard, long training camp, 4 months, which as most training camps, about 10 weeks, but generally 8 to 10 weeks, we say. But he was away in Bangkok and you know, took the rematch extremely seriously. He talked about, you know, the being levied upon his shoulders as he was the champion. He didn't exemplify any nerves whatsoever. He was in magnificent shape. Roman, when I saw him on the scales, I was very. He was with Santoshi, his old strength and conditioner, but he exhibited the signs of, you know, far too much flesh. Whenever he's in Nicaragua and certainly when he's training in Costa Rica, cutting weight, and he's spending time, you know, in the heat and in saunas to reduce the weight. So it wonders you know, how enough his weight sort of balloons up in between fights, whether he's just fruits, you know, is financially quite comfortable now. So, you know, when you've come from, you know, harsh upbringings and you've, you know, applied your trait for a number of years, you know, we're all going to enjoy life, so you can't, you know, criticize the man. But the ring walk was definitely significant, Mike, and I think even you touched upon before, you know, how passive he was in all of the fight build-ups. There wasn't that intensity of, you know, correcting what he perceived and what the general consensus was, you know, a bad decision, certainly at that late stage where he was trying to, you know, closing in on Floyd's record. So, you know, so that was extremely harsh upon him, but he didn't really show any animosity towards anybody, but that's very much his Christian faith. So it's kind of hard to differentiate because you've never really seen him before being extremely vocal and saying that, look, I'm going to tear his head off. But yeah, the ring walk and certainly the introductions, one could gauge, you know, the emotion that was within him. You know, tears building up in his eyes. You know, just an air of resignation, almost like the final coronation. I think mentally he knew this was, you know, the end. You know, we didn't just know extensively, you know, that would be it. But there was just something a little bit different. And when the opening bell rang, Roman, in all of his career, has been first getting off his punches, where it's early off, where he was a little bit more cautious and counter punching, or later on as he's become more of a front foot pressure attritional fighter. But Srisaket was getting his punches off, far quicker. And the adjustment, I think, what Srisaket made in this fight, although he was standing in front of Roman, he'd shortened his punches and he was generating far more velocity through them. He was throwing every punch with just evil intentions. Just rebounding off Roman's guard, hitting his rib cage, almost lifting him at times off the ground. Roman was very uneasy, complaining about a head clash early on. So the negativity was there from the very start. Roman was obviously far more circumspect in the opening rounds, and I expected him to do that. I didn't expect him to be gung-ho. I thought he would, try and take his time a little bit more, get off his counter shots as he did early on, and that's the way Tanaka works as well. But Srisaket was magnificent. Just hitting the body, relentlessly, every punch, literally. Hurtful shots. For all those who thought he was just a one-handed fighter, he just showed a tremendous right hook, shortened it up beautifully. Roman was firing punches. He was going for that overhand right himself, but Srisaket was just first to the target. And, Roman got up, but the follow-up right hook was just a scintillating punch. And unfortunately, yeah, Mike, that was, a brutal knockout. But in sort of concluding, Mike, how I sort of summarize this situation in Roman itself, Mike, if we just sort of take a look back, 48 fights, Mike. He's won titles in multiple jurisdictions, 4 weight classes. That's a 10% increase in body weight, which is quite extraordinary for a smaller man. He fights in a very high risk and attritional style. He's beaten more past and current unified champions than any other fighter currently fighting in boxing. He's also, financially comfortable. He had the mental burden of his trainer dying as well, who he was very close with. And I think ultimately he had, obviously, he'd won titles at Ford. He'd eclipsed his hero, his mentor, his tutor in Alexis Arguello in becoming a 4-weight world champion. So I think when you combine all of those factors, Mike, I think the great man had reached his threshold both mentally and physically. But ultimately, he's undoubtedly one of the greatest fighters I've ever seen, and a Hall of Fame inductee.
I see Gail has joined us. She's out there in Vegas covering the fight for Community Digital News. I'll go to you, Bo, and then Gail, Daniel, and Jacob. You can follow up. Having a few days to reflect now. Your thoughts on the fight, and we've talked a lot. We've talked a lot about a lot of the focus, has been on Chocolatito and his fall. But to Natty's and Gus's point, let's not overlook what Srisaket did. For those who think that he's either a one-handed fighter or a one-hit wonder, he showed quite differently Saturday night.
Yeah, Mike, he did, and it's not so much as Roman Gonzalez's fall. It's the fall of that shirt that Jacob had to wear to the fight. I'm sorry about that, bruh. I saw the picture with the shirt on, Jacob. I'm sorry, man. You can't wear it no more. Memories, right?
For those who don't know what we're talking about, Jacob, he shared a pic Saturday night at the fight with him and Francis and Joe from Full Boxing News, and Jacob was rocking a Chocolatito shirt. But proceed, Gus.
Yeah,
Proceed, Bo.
yeah. You know what? Now that I had time to reflect, it reminded me of something that I really had to think about, which is what happened to Roman Gonzalez. The same thing that happened to Mike Tyson. When Customato died, a part of Mike died with him, and I think that's the same thing we saw with Roman Gonzalez. When his trainer passed away, part of Chocolatito, the guy who we saw that was just like you said, relentless, extremely tough, willing to go through hell just to get to you. Part of that died with him. And the thing is, when you're with somebody for so long and you have a bond with them for so long, you lose a person that you share something with that close, and you're lost. And sometimes it's hard for you to find yourself. And for fighters, when you lose a trainer, loved one, there's two choices: either you take it and you keep pushing forward, or you're lost and you need some time to figure out, how to get it back. And I think part of that's what happened to him, on coupled with the fact that he was in there with just such a tough dude. And then you had a guy in Rungvisai, like you said, who was an unknown. And how many times have we seen this in boxing where the unknown has went through so much in his life that this moment has come. So he's hardened for it when the other guy is still kind of rambling and kind of weakened. So you had a guy who's hardened, and then you give him 4 months to train, 4 months. Because like he said, he had to train under 2 months. So now you give him 4 months to properly train, 4 months to properly soak in. Everybody telling him you're a one-punch fighter. Everybody telling him you didn't really win it. Everybody pretty much, probably not even giving him no credit for the second fight as well. So you you got 4 months to take that in. You've been waiting for it, and people try to take it from you. That's like extra motivation for you to really go out and show everybody, who you are and what you're really made of. And that's what all things came to a head. Listen, I take nothing away from Roman Gonzalez, and I've often said I don't believe that he was a number one pound for pound guy, because you got to show me more. But still, when you're going up 4 weight divisions and you're used to pushing guys back, you're used to being able to take their punches like it's Skittles, and then you run up against that wall, well, it's not happening for you. And then you couple it on his trainer passing away, where his mind is and him not being right. And then I think somebody mentioned it, even if you watched him, the HBO commentator was saying, even in the interviews, Chocolatito didn't seem right. He even admitted, yeah, the guy beat me, he got a good win. And I'm just like, that's not how somebody who's going to go out there and kick some ass talks. Even if you lose, you'd be like, okay, I don't think I lost. I don't think I lost. It was a close fight that went his way, but I don't think I lost. But you're going to see something different.
Yeah, like I
So
was saying, I think I was on your show, Bo. Uh, Championship fighters are in many ways championship liars. Liars.
mm-hmm.
He was admitting things that you just don't admit to.
Yeah, and that's so. Listen, you got to have stubbornness and denial about yourself to be a championship fighter. Hell, ask Bernard Hopkins. He still thinks that he was pushed out the ring. So, uh, it's that fall from the top when you hit like how Roman fell is very hard, but it's the sport. I believe, I'll hope that he, maybe go down and weight at 112 and fight again, because I don't want that to be how he was remembered. Because at the very least, I give him credit for this. Everybody's now paying attention to the lower weight division, and that's in credit to Roman Gonzalez. Okay, because I don't remember people being this excited about lower weight division since Michael Carbajal. So you have all these great matchups that people are looking at: Inoue, Estrada, Rungvisai, Cuadras again, Arroyo. So I give him credit. Listen, you made us pay attention to the lower weight division. So give that man credit for that. And this is boxing. It happens, but I don't want this to be the end of Roman Gonzalez. I don't want him to go out like this. I want him to come back, go down and weight, get you a victory, then ride off into the sunset, because he at least deserves that.
I'm going to you, Gail and Jacob. Gail, you was at press row covering the fight. Jacob, you was in the crowd with the folks. Um, Looking back now, a few days later, one, your level of shock as the fight was happening, Gail and Jacob, and taking a step back some days later, your thoughts on the fight now.
Well, first of all, I'm going to apologize up front for anybody listening who hears all the din behind me. I am in the media center at the NGM Grand Hotel as we prepare for a big fight weekend here with Canelo and Golovkin. Watching last weekend, I've got to say, from the minute Chocolatito made his ring walk, it was evident he wasn't quite right for the fight that night. He wasn't there. And once he got in the ring and engaged with Sor Rungvisai, evident that this was not going to be his night. However, I did not think he was going to suffer such a brutal knockout. I really didn't think. It just appeared to me that he was struggling for whatever reason. Was it changes in training? Is it the difficulties he's had at 115? 115 has not admittedly been a real great weight for him. His greatest victories have not been at this weight. And, we all talk about fighters growing old overnight, growing perhaps unmotivated overnight. Boxing isn't a sport you approach halfway or even part way. I had a long conversation this afternoon with Ryan Blue Chip Martin, wonderful prospect out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, who will be on the undercard of the fight this weekend. And Ryan and I had a discussion about focus and how important focus is. Focus for a fighter is everything. And I just don't think Chocolatito has a grasp on it. I want to say, having said all that, we cannot overlook what he has brought to the smaller weight divisions. His legacy, without regard to what happened on Saturday night, to me, is unassailable. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Whether he comes back or not, I am almost of the opinion that he should call it a day if that's the best he can do. He said in an interview with a Nicaraguan newspaper that he was going to sit down with his camp, his family, and talk over his future. And even then, he was very lukewarm about whether it was likely he was going to come back. That says to me, I don't think he will. And if the time is right for him to retire, God bless him. And we will look back very fondly on his career. And every guy in those smaller weight divisions should thank him personally for opening the door. We wouldn't have been watching a Cuadras, Estrada, or an Inoue Nieves if it hadn't been for Chocolatito, at least not in the modern era. So we all owe him that debt. He also was asked whether or not he considered going back down to 112, and he said he just absolutely cannot make it. No way. And the truth is, I think he's having trouble making 115. When you get in your 30s, I'm here to tell you, it happens.
Jacob and Daniel.
First, I'd like to shout out Joe and Francis for boxing. It was great to meet them at the fight. It's always nice to meet people. Like I've met Gail before and other people that I've talked to on social media. So whether or not they make the show tonight, shout out to them. To answer your initial question, I was shocked the night of, and I'm still kind of shocked. It wasn't something that I was expecting. I was one of the, maybe one of the few that thought that Chocolatito had pulled out the first fight, be it a tough fight with Rungvisai, but I still thought he did enough to win that fight. And, even in that fight, as tough as it was, and he was getting hit, he seemed to, not be really in any serious trouble at any point. So I thought, even though Rungvisai was a lot bigger than him, and he seemed like Chocolatito was having trouble carrying or struggling at that new weight at 115. I thought that he could do enough to win the second fight. But I don't want to discredit Rungvisai because he came in well prepared and very focused. And I've even heard Chocolatito say himself, I know people are saying that he didn't look himself and all this stuff, but that saying that he had a great camp and no excuses. And I just I think I can't remember who said it earlier, but he he's just not good at this weight. Not good, but he's just not able to compete at this weight class because he's too small. He did a lot of good things in lower weight classes, but he has struggled at this weight. He had a close fight with Cuadras. He had the Rungvisai fight, and now this knockout. And it was a brutal knockout. One thing I didn't understand. I mean, I kind of understand it because it was a very pro Chocolatito crowd. That he didn't try to hold or hug or try to at least make it out of the round. When he got hit and toppled over, I mean, I didn't think he was going to get back up, and credit to him for getting up. But at that point, if he wasn't going to hold, then he was just going to try to punch his way out. It was just a matter of time, and he got laid out. I mean, he was out very badly. Potentially, could we see him back at? I don't think he should come back at 115. But again, if he's having trouble making the weight, that's going to be a decision for him. I like Bo, don't want to see him go out like that. I think that's hopefully he can go out on a win. But he's done enough in the sport, and I think he'll be a Hall of Famer. And in my opinion, at one time, the shirt I was wearing, pound for pound, I had him on as number one as my pound for pound at one time. So, I mean, to me, he had that moniker, and I was able to see him. This is my third time seeing him live, and he entertained, and he wasn't afraid to fight top level competition. So I'm always going to give him credit for that. He doesn't. In my opinion, try to pad his record or take soft touches, when he could, and especially when he was so close to that record, which I have a little asterisk on anyway. But it was I'm happy for Rungvisai, because he really seemed like he wanted to win, and they were talking about how he only had 2 months to train the previous fight, and he had 4 months to train for this fight, and kind of the joke was, well, I hate to see you if you had like 6 months or 8 months to train. But hopefully we can see some good matchups with him, Estrada or Inoue. Yeah, it was really shocking.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
The way you'd like to look at a fight is I think we've all described it in a certain way. When you face a guy and you beat him the first time, you know how to probably beat him better the second time. What happened with this fight? Now, sure, this was Chocolatito's plateau as far as weight class. He may have, like I said, overdone it a little bit going to 115. I understand why he went to 115, but it may have been a little bit too much for him because none of those fights that he was at 115 were easy fights for him, whether it was Cuadras or these two fights with Gonzalez. And you could just tell he was off. Like you mentioned the fighter meetings. I noticed too, like watching the replay, that his face was a bit emotional when he walked into the ring. But in the ring, like he never got the motor going that we know Roman Gonzalez has. When he turns on that game and he puts in that work rate, he's almost impossible to stop. He never got a chance to get started. Now that's good credit to Rungvisai, who understood never get him started, hit him to the body early, and hit him with combination punches, which we should know. Like people mentioned it. Both the knockdowns were current of his offhand. Not his lead, not the strong hand, supposed to be left. Or both came from right hooks. And you got to get credit to Rungvisai. Like he became here, he became focused. He knew the game plan we needed to do. He never allowed Chocolatito to set up the pace. Ultimately got him a much, much talked about victory. But when it comes to Chocolatito, I'm going to reference Gail's interview. Gail mentioned, like it was for a Nicaraguan newspaper called La Prensa. He pretty much said I'm ready to retire. He said, I'm going to let my kids decide, but I'm ready to retire. Which to me tells me he's gone. Part of me, like then I mentioned it when Bo had his show on, that I don't think he ever recovered from losing his trainer mentally. And I treat it almost in the same way that Mike Tyson, what happened to him after Customato died. It just wasn't the same. It didn't, like with Mike Tyson, yeah, he was still a champion, he was still the baddest man on the planet, but he was just never the same. The same thing happened to Chocolatito. He was just not the same. And I do think, to me, this is the end for him. He's already said he physically cannot make 112 anymore. And even if he waits a long time to really like get back in shape and prepare his body, that's a long time where he's not training. Which means technically, like, he can naturally even get himself out of the out of the Superfly division if he chose to come back. So, like I said, to me, the end. But nobody should forget the career that Gonzalez had. Gus mentioned the accolades when it comes to the people he's beaten, the way he has beaten them, the way it looked with Alexis Arguello. He was able to surpass him as far as the divisions he became champion in. And also because of the fact, as good as Arguello was, he never got into that discussion where you could say number one pound for pound, the way Chocolatito did. Even if you disagree with it. Like I said, the fact that he was even in the discussion should tell you how good he was. In an era, like I said, where Floyd was still hovering around somewhere, to get that accolade, that should speak volumes. And like I said, he, as far as financially goes, yeah, he's almost, I think, perfectly in the Marcos Maidana area where he's made enough money where he can live comfortably in Nicaragua for the rest of his life and not have to worry about things. That's probably the reason why he said his kids were going to decide his fate. Because to me, like, mentally, he's already checked out. There's really not much more he can do other than like get one last hurrah victory. But depends first how long he takes off and how long things training camp, because it's going to be a super flyweight. He's already said it. He can't make 112 anymore. And there's a good chance if it is a super fly, he might lose again. So yeah, I think we see him go, and we're gonna see, like I said, some very good things from Srisaket Sor Rungvisai in the future.
Okay. Yeah. What I'm hearing from Chocolatito, it sounds like he's done. Sounds like he doesn't want it anymore. He says he can't get down to 112. That's a problem because the guys at 115 are just too big and too strong for him, in my opinion. As far as SSR, you have to applaud him. You have to give him credit for what he did in the first fight and what he did in his fight. And moving forward, to quote Andre Ward, he's going to be a problem. He's going to be a problem for anybody he faces at 115 pounds. No doubt about it. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to split some fights up between certain individuals because I know we kind of pressed for time and folks got to. I want to get this show on time. I know folks got to get up early for work and blah 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 in the morning. So what I'm going to do is during these recaps, I'm going to split certain fights up between certain individuals. I'm going to go back to you, Gail and Jacob, and talk about the U.S. debut of Naoya Inoue. You both were in the house. Your impressions on his win over Nieves, six round stoppage. How do you think he looked? What areas do you think he can improve on, and where does he fit in the 115, 118 backdrop, given what you saw Saturday night? First, with you, Gail.
Well, I don't know about you, Jacob, but even though I was several feet from the ring, damn, I felt sometimes I was close enough to be feeling some of those body shots. I mean, they were blistering. They had every bit of torque on them one guy can leverage. Inoue is one of those guys that punches up from his feet. His footwork is incredibly solid, and that makes someone so effective. He plants, he powers up from all the muscles below the waist, and lets it rip. And yeah, you had to feel so bad for Antonio Nieves, who is not a bad fighter at all. Credit to him for getting in the ring. He stood in there. He took it tough. He took a lot of shots. I mean, far more than I thought anybody else could possibly take. And it was smart of his corner, past the halfway point, to say, yeah, we're done. We are done here. You could literally hear those punches anywhere you were sitting in the arena. He's fast, he's flashy, he's impressive, and he knows how to showboat a little, which got some of the fans going as he tried to liven things up and maybe encourage Nieves. At the post-fight news conference, somebody asked him, well, where'd you learn to do that stuff? And he said, well, he was running, and I wanted him to come after me. I wanted to make it a fight. I liked what I saw. He is young. He's got some things he needs to work on. Initially, a lot of people around me were talking about, that his head movement isn't the greatest, and his upper body movement, maybe isn't the greatest. But, I was sitting there thinking, well, that's what people have said for years and years about Gennady Golovkin, and past a point, when you can hit that hard, how critical about that can you be? I mean, if nobody's going to get to you. He, funny enough, reminded me of Golovkin in the way he cuts off the ring, the way he tucks that chin, and the way he just goes after the body. Really impressive. And everybody who knows me knows there's nothing I enjoy more than a body shot knockout. So it was fun to watch. I'm going to toss it to Jacob.
It wasn't just the body shots and just the overall power. What I liked about Inoue, excuse me. I love the jab. It was fast and it was really, really hard.
Thank you for bringing that up. And he uses that jab again in very similar way as Golovkin. And that is not a rangefinder jab. That is not a tap you, I'm here jab. That is a power punch jab. And now those things add up and they beat a guy down.
Your thoughts, Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and there's a couple things I took away from this fight. One, Inoue, I think early on knew that Nieves wasn't going to offer any real opposition in punching power or frequency of punches. So he just basically stalked him all around the ring and just was trying to land hard punches on him. Nieves, he, for as much as he talked early in the fight, I mean, I would have liked to see a little bit more offense from him. When he did let his hands go, he did connect, but again, not with a lot of power. But again, I don't know if that is because Inoue wasn't really worried about his punching power, so he was kind of almost baiting him to throw so that it would open him up for his shots. He got some rounds in. I think it was a 6th round that ended up finishing in, and the round before that, in the 5th, he hit him with a vicious body shot and put him down. Kind of a delayed reaction knockdown, or Nieves took a knee. But Inoue, to me, he's, like Gail said, he's still young and still kind of, what is he, 10 or 11 fights in here. I'm sorry, 14 fights in. I think he needs to work on a few things. I saw him kind of a little bit open for the counter because he throws such hard punches. He does expose himself a little bit. So, But again, I don't know if this is because of the competition he was fighting. And again, I'm sure HBO and his promoters and everybody wants to make sure that, he was going to win the fight and it was going to be a good American debut because, they're hyping him up. And of course they wanted that Roman Gonzalez fight, but, now with Rungvisai there in the waiting, and then a couple more other fighters that we're going to talk about. I mean, it will be an exciting, I think, fight. But he did well and he had quite a few fans there. So, hats off to him. He got the job done and he came out with the victory.
Oh, excuse me, I was on mute there. I'm going to you, Bo and Gus, to talk about Gallo, Estrada, and Cuadras. I go to you guys specifically because we had a back and forth last week uh, about this fight, uh, specifically when it comes to the ring intelligence of both guys. Cuadras ended up winning by a point on all three scorecards. I personally had Gallo Estrada winning by a wider margin. I think Estrada.
No,
I think
well,
Estrada.
Estrada won by.
I
Estrada.
was gonna
Estrada. Estrada.
wait
Estrada.
till you finish, yeah, but Estrada won that fight.
Estrada won by a point on all three scores cards. I had Estrada winning by a wider margin. I thought he whipped Cuadras' butt over the second half of the fight in particular. I think from round 4 or 5 on, he took it to him. Uh, but yeah, you may have to eat some crow for this one, Bo. Your thoughts on this fight, and then you can follow up, Gus.
Yeah, I got to eat some crow. I said it last time on the show, and I'll repeat it again. I made an incorrect statement, so you guys mark this on your calendar. I was wrong when I said that Quadras had more ring intelligence than Estrada. Boy, was I wrong. So mark this down on you guys' calendar. This is not happening often. As a matter of fact, my wife is probably jealous because she never hears nothing like that. But yeah, I actually had I had Quadras winning the same at 114, 113, hell Letterman. So, but on my scorecard, there were 2 rounds I had question marks by. So all that tells me is the judges, the rounds that I had question marks by, just like Max Kellerman was saying, they could have easily went to Estrada. Cuadras had the more I'm gonna say flashier punches, but Estrada had the more telling shots. Like his punches, you can see they started taking some steam off of even what Cuadras wanted to do. Um, so it was, man, it was a good fight. Like I never I never thought that I've always watched little guys. And little guys will always get you excited to watch because they fight. They will fight. But I never thought I'd be that excited to see a card with nothing but little guys on it. And they were all good fights. So even though Estrada won that fight, and I'll give him full credit for winning, because like I said, it could have went either way. What I saw out of Estrada was, because Estrada had been out the ring for a while. He hadn't fought in a while. But what I like out of Estrada was his sheer just discipline. When he had Cuadras hurt, and he tried to jump on him for a second, but when he realized, hey, I couldn't jump on him, he got back in his envelope and went back to what was working for him, right? Whenever Cuadras tried to have a moment, Estrada made sure he had a bigger moment, and that was probably what was telling to the judges, because there was moments where you would see Cuadras hit Estrada with 3 punches, but Estrada would hit him with one hard shot that was like almost equal to those 3 punches. So Estrada was able to have even bigger moments in those moments. So man, good fight. As far as a Noel, I was watching his ring injuries. I was waiting to see Gale come down next to him, but there was only one redhead that come down, so I felt cheated. But yeah, him and Nieve, like I'm with Gale. When he hit him to that body, he went down to the body. I said, this guy is now going to the body. He's going to be a problem. He's punching to the body like this. This guy's going to be a problem. And all I thought about was a Noel and Estrada and Rungvisai and Noel, like all great fights and matchups. And then maybe somebody going up to 118 and challenging Neri or Zalati Tate. So I'm like super excited for this division. And again, like somebody said earlier, all praise to Roman Gonzalez, because had it not been for him, we wouldn't be paying attention to this right now.
I'm going to you, Gus. I've heard some discussion in analyzing this fight. Um, excuse me, in checking out the comments on social media, Twitter especially, and even on some channels on the YTBC, I've heard folks complain about Estrada being boring, complain that he's fighting at one speed. I think when you look at Gallo Estrada, people overlook the professionalism, overlook the intelligence, overlook the subtle things that he happens to do in the ring. Very well balanced, very educated fighter who does everything well. And it showed in this fight when Cuadras was doing, while looking more active, he wasn't as effective. But when Gallo Estrada, when he let the punches go, they were doing more damage, in my opinion. Uh, Offensive and defense perspective, it looked like he was getting hit with shots, but when you really sit back and look at a second and third time, or even look in slow motion, he wasn't getting hit with as many shots as it appeared, particularly live in full speed. So, talk about this fight and talk about some of the nuanced things that Gallo Estrada does to make him such an effective fighter. Unmute your mic, Gus.
Yes, sorry. It was a magnificent fight. Words just cannot emphasize the level of skill that was on display, and it just reinforces, Mike, something you were talking about. This most falsest of pre-misconceptions that fighters at these lower weight categories are just one-dimensional, specifically just relying on a volume of punch as the pounds per square inch to what the human body's resistance is. So thus they can just throw more punches and they just rely on that attritional style, to achieve their victories, which, all of us have been watching boxing for so long, it just continues to disillusion me with all of these fucking lethargic devils out there who know absolutely nothing about the sport. We saw the best of Mexico there. Skill in both fighters, but a contrast of styles and the manner in which they achieve, they go about their business. It was a pleasure seeing Estrada again, Mike. We know he's been extremely avoided and he's been a floater at the lower weights, and it's such a travesty that this was only his second major television exposure fighting in the US. He's had so many great fights, but it just reinforces that, that the US is not really the epicenter of boxing when it comes to a lot of these fighters, because they simply don't know about the level of talent that is out there. But it was a fantastic matchup because they both were the same size, effectively, height-wise and reach. But those who felt that Cuadras was the superior in the earlier rounds, I vehemently disagree. I felt Juan Francisco had settled a lot quicker. Cuadras was making the error. Now we know Cuadras is a supremely athletic fighter whose hand speed is arguably amongst their, you're talking about like the Gary Russells of the sport. It's frightening how quickly his hands motor through the punches. And he relies on, great lateral movement, not only to mentally fatigue you, but then he would step in later on, and that's how he's beaten up a lot of fighters. So he's got great, foot movement. He can throw punches on the fly, combination punches. But Estrada, what he was doing very, I think, effectively in the earlier rounds, he was just taking that step backwards. So Cuadras was just, he didn't get into range properly, and he was falling in with his punches. And Estrada from like 40, from like, the 15th second onwards, was countering him with a short left, a beautiful right, stepping back, 2 hits to the body. And it just, reinforces this whole notion again, Mike, about style over substance, and how people are just, how they are just infiltrated by flashy razzmatazz combinations as opposed to who's actually landing the more effective punches. And that epidemic has sadly been ruining boxing recently. We saw, Badu Jack and James DeGale. We saw the first Leo Santa Cruz and Carl Frampton fight. And we saw the Robert Easter and Denis Shafikov fight, where style, was perceived to have better over substance, but they were just all absolutely wrong. And Estrada, I think he was more relaxed. He had a better composure. He had the better stance as well. Cuadras was far too erratic, in my opinion. There's a difference between when a fighter is forced to switch hit, change his stance, because his A game isn't working. And the fact that Cuadras, gave up the switch hitting later on, I think that reinforces the point that he realized that it wasn't working. Whenever Cuadras would switch hit, Estrada would take either a step to the side, try and get underneath that left hand which Cuadras was firing on top, and he would counter with that right hand, beautiful short right hand on top. Sometimes he would take a step back and he would fire a long counter. Estrada both, from a lead position and from a counter position, we saw that sort of hybrid Rafael Marquez one, Manuel Marquez in one. He's just an unbelievably gifted boxer, cerebral. Whether there's whether when Cuadras actually cut the distance and started getting his head literally on Estrada's chest, that's when he was having the better success, because that combination punching when he was pretty much inside the pocket was working well. And we know Estrada doesn't have as fast hands, so he was having a degree of trouble then. But Estrada then began to even change his tactics as well. He was actually firing longer jabs to try and elongate that distance to get his range even better. So, his ability to even make adjustments in the fight, at times he was walking him down, and at times he was prepared to take 2 or 3 punches, and he would actually parry 2 of the punches, and he would fire the harder, more devastating single punch as opposed to Cuadras' flashier sort of 2 punch. And we know when you're on your toes and you're floating around, you can't really transfer your weight from your legs to your fists. I don't think you're getting maximum mustard on your punches. But Estrada, I think his feet were more set. He was better balanced, and he was actually getting the better, trajectory with his punches. And we saw with the knockdown as well, Mike. He set up Cuadras beautifully with that left to the body, and it wasn't a hard shot. It was actually a touch shot. I had to slow it down in slow motion just to have a look, but it was an ambush style of punch just to get Cuadras' attention. He dropped his hands a bit, and Estrada fired that, hard right hand, straight right hand on top, to floor him. And I think in the closing rounds, I think Estrada was comfortably, outworking him, and I think he was beating him to the punch both, and certainly counter punching a lot better in the later rounds. Cuadras, we know, is infamous for having a fantastic stamina. But I think he exacerbated far too much energy, not only the physical energy of the harder shots, but also he was expanding too much mental energy, because he was thinking, damn, this isn't working. I've got to do this. I've got to switch it. I've got to try and step in. So we know however, that depletes the gas tank far more sometimes than the physical, punches one is, absorbing. But Estrada was, so relaxed. I never even see that guy take a deep breath his entire fight. I mean, if I'm wrong, please, point it out. But, I watched the fight numerous times. So ultimately, I had it 9 rounds to 3, one Francisco Estrada. It was competitive, but he was just a better boxer, better fighter. And I'm also very disappointed with this disparaging commentary from, HBO, Andre Ward in particular, talking about how how Estrada, how you felt he never even had the gears. I don't think he's ever even seen him fight before. Max Kellerman, Harold Lederman, talking about how he's just a sort of a methodical fighter. They got absolutely no idea whatsoever. It was. I thought he was magnificent, Mike. Just a pleasure, just to watch him again.
I have the same score as you, Gus. Just as FYI.
Yeah, respect.
Going to go around here quickly. Starting with Natty. Who are you more? Given what you saw during the fight, during each of the fights, short answers, please. Who were you most impressed by? And of all these fighters, the Srisaket, the Inoues, the Cuadras, Gallo Estrada, who would essentially be your pick? Starting with you, Natty.
I think I might want to go with the young Inoue, man. I like what he was doing in the ring. Like you mentioned before, I like his jab. And I don't think he's that bad defensively, actually. You know what I'm saying? I don't think his head movement is that bad. There was a lot of times where he was slipping punches very well. You know what I mean? He wasn't that hard, he wasn't that easy to hit in there. Either he had the high guard or he would slip the punch and counter. But it's the jab and the way he cuts off the ring that really impressed me, man, especially for such a young fighter, and the fact that he likes to go to the body. And my favorite fight is the body snatcher.
Indeed. Daniel.
What was the question again, Mike?
Quick answer, please. Based on what you saw from Superfly between Srisaket, Inoue, Gallo, Cuadras, who were you more impressed by? If, and for lack of a better term, who is essentially your pick amongst those fighters?
I'd have to say Gallo, because I like the pace the Gallo did fighting against Cuadras. He did a methodical breakdown, or Carlos Cuadras waited for him to get tired a bit, and then throw the more telling punches. And it's interesting enough, this little circle is going to come together very, very soon, because literally didn't even wait until the press conference. Apparently, Gallo already ordered his promoters to get the Rungvisai fight in StubHub December. So we're going to get that little collision more than you think. Inoue, to me, I like it. I like the way he goes, but there were times where Nieves kept hitting him with that right hand. So may need a little bit more time before he gets in that area.
Same question to you, Gail.
As much as I was frankly dazzled by Inoue, very excited to see him, Sor Rungvisai for me. He walked into that arena knowing that virtually everybody there, with few exceptions, thought he'd lost the first fight to Chocolatito. I certainly was one of them. He had a lot to prove, and damn, he did it. He proved it. He put a stamp on it. He sealed it. He boxed it up and said, "How you like me now?" That is a tough thing to do, especially in the lion's den and the din of StubHub. And I can't wait to see him and Estrada get it on. And at this point, I would favor Rungvisai in that fight.
Jacob.
As impressed as I was with Estrada, I mean, I had picked him to win, and I knew, I just, to me, he had a really, game Cuadras, but I have to go with Gail on this also. It's not the fact that he beat Gonzalez, but how he beat him. I mean, it was pretty much a 4-round massacre. And, somebody that I place as high up as Gonzalez, that was the most impressive thing I saw all night.
Gus.
I hope that was a rhetorical question, Mike, because you know damn well who it was, man. Yeah, Gallo, Mike. I've always loved Mexican boxers. That's how I turned onto the sport. You know, Carlos, Zarate, Ruben Oliveira, Salvador Sanchez, and Juan Frisco Estrada, Mike. I don't need anything else.
Indeed, Bo.
Yeah, I agree with Gail and Jacob. As much as I was impressed with Estrada because it was the tale of two halves. It was the flashy guy versus the old school guy. And I'm old school, and sticking to old school, and kept sticking at him and sticking at him. But the way Rungvisai, like Gail said, the mental toughness he showed in this second fight, and the mental toughness that he has. I look at him fighting these guys. He could be a hard guy to deal with because he beat the number one guy not once but twice, and then the second time, he knocks him out. So he's from a mental standpoint, from just a all out, the feeling that he has, he could be, his confidence is riding high. That could be a hard guy to deal with.
It's tough for
And
me.
that crowd was booing the shit out of Rungvisai.
It's tough for me because I've been saying for a while now. I could see the writing on the wall uh, from Roman, so I could see him getting beat. Um, I didn't see him getting blasted the way he did, um, but I'm going with Gaio because look, man. As I stated earlier, a beautifully constructed fighter. I like guys who can do everything and do everything well. And that's the kind of fighter he is. I don't know if he's the best of the lot, but he may be my favorite to watch because he can do so many damn it, he can do so many things in that ring. You want a guy who can jab, he can do that. You want a guy who has solo defense, he can do that. He can do that. You want guys who can come on the front foot and fight off the back foot. He can do that. Uh, Ability to go to the head and body. He can do all that. So for me, I might have to lean towards Gallo Estrada. I don't know if he's the best of the lot. I don't know if he can beat if he's the top dog, but um, I was really really impressed by the way he adjusted. Uh, I disagree a little bit on Gus. I thought Cuadras. Um, had the edge in the early rounds due to his activity. But I was really, really impressed with the way Gallo Estrada adjusted to that. It really carried the play and carried the fight over the second half. I'm going to you, Natty, and talk about the beginning of the Cruiserweight tournament. Um, I've been critical of Oleksandr Usyk in his last couple of fights. Uh, the way that they got rid of Mr. Bashir. It was cold. I know it's the business of boxing, but it was cold how they did it. I didn't like his last two fights with Hunter, and I can't remember the other guy, the South African fellow that he fought. Um, he began the tournament on Saturday in Berlin, stopping Marco Huck in 10. Um, Comment on his performance, but the question I pose for you, am I being a little bit too critical here in terms of his style, what we saw with him from Bashir, and as opposed to what we've seen from him now in his last three fights? Is it just could it be a simple case that when you change trainers, you change styles, maybe there's a period of adjustment and orientation, and within that, you may see some mistakes here? So comment on the fight itself, and am I being a little bit too critical of Oleksandr Usyk?
A little bit, but
Mike,
not too much. You're not too far fetched. You're not too far off. But you just got to understand that he was just a little more defensive minded when he was fighting with Mr. Bashir. Um, from a lot of fans, he took criticism for that. You know what I'm saying? So once he changed trainers, I think he's training with Lomachenko's dad. Is that right? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
yes.
Yes, I think he's training with Lomachenko's dad. He's kind of letting his hands go a little more. You know what I'm saying? And when you let your hands go more, you're gonna get hit a little bit more. But it makes for more exciting fights, and I guess that's what he's looking for. He's looking to make himself a star. You know, he's always his plan has always been to go to heavyweight. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think he's really trying to make a name for himself. Yes, he looked really hittable and beatable in his last two fights, but before Marco Huck, but he ended up getting the job done and ended up stopping both opponents. You know what I mean? As far as this fight here, I had no doubt in my mind that he was going to beat Marco Huck. You know what I'm saying? Marco Huck just does not have the talent to deal with a Usyk. You know what I'm saying? I think Usyk broke him down, beat him down, knocked him out. You know what I'm saying? And I think Marco Huck, I've never really rated him as a fighter. He has really good power. He's awkward. If you don't prepare for him, kind of like Povetkin. In that Povetkin fight, if you don't prepare for him, he can make you look bad in there. You know what I'm saying? But as far as talent, it was very lopsided. You know what I'm saying? And it kind of showed in the fight, in my opinion. And yeah, the criticism is fair, but I think he's doing this on purpose. He's switching his style up on purpose to make himself more marketable, in my opinion.
I'll go to you, Daniel, on this last fight. We talked a lot about young super middleweight prospect contender David Benavidez. He got his title shot last week on Friday against Ronald Gavril. He won by unanimous decision, becoming youngest super middleweight world champion. I believe it was the WBC belt. Yeah, WBC belt. But in watching the fight, you have to give Gavril credit. He fought hard. He fought well. Benavidez had the advantage, in my opinion, but Gavril, he put Benavidez down in the last fight. The learning experience for Benavidez, I think he become better. He will become better as a result of this. But at the same time, Gavril, he exposed some chinks in the armor of the young David Benavidez.
He did in many ways. He showed that Benavidez is subject to lows at times. He showed that he can be countered pretty well. And he showed that you can catch him. Well, all fighters can be catched with the right punch. But what he also showed is that Benavidez does have a second gear in him. Because he was getting tired in the 8th, there was 7th, 8th, through the 10th round, but round 11 came in and he came roaring back. So there's a very, very good chance that this, like I said, that this fight could probably get rematched. Gavril done everything that he could to earn a rematch. And ultimately, yeah, it is a fight that he needed. Because yes, he ultimately did win the title and also did wow us in his last fight against Porky Medina by knocking out a guy who was pretty hard to put down, but this was a good learning experience. He showed a guy that could turn him in certain angles. So a guy that can punch in his gaps in defense. And also showed a guy that who will last in the ring with him. Not everybody is going to go down. But Benavidez, like I say, he showed poise, like he did try to come in there. He showed patience, that where he wanted to take a rest, and also when he wanted to come on. And ultimately, say he showed that as good as he is now, there's definitely a lot more potential still underneath the surface. Now, he's going to be learning on the job in this sense as a champion. He's 20 years old, not even old enough to drink. So it's going to be a learning experience for him. But luckily, he's in the division that a lot of the top guys are not what they used to be. We don't know what the shit that James DeGale is going to look like after he recovers from bottle jack. We don't know if George Grosse is going to survive this tournament, the World Boxing Super Series. Neither we know of Chris Eubanks, of Callum Smith, or even like the Durrell brothers whenever they stop fucking up. So it's an interesting tale. He's going to be a good champion a long time, and quite frankly, I'd probably give it a year. But if they both keep their belts, him and Zurdo, It's the fight to make at that weight class. So that ultimately is going to be probably the end goal, and I'll be there to see it.
Indeed, indeed. Not going to talk about any real news this week. I'm going straight to the previews. A little bit of a warning. We're going to talk Triple G and Chocolatito last. But I want to talk about some of the other fights that's happening in an interim before we get to that. And I'm just going to throw the fights out there, and anybody who wants to have a stab at it, please do. Look, Billy Joe Saunders, long layoff, finally getting into the ring this weekend, fighting Willie Monroe. I'm sorry, I don't necessarily trust Billy Joe. Too many instances of him having fights on and then having fights off. Too many instances of seeing him really blowing up in weight. Am I wrong in thinking, even though Saunders is talking about knockout this, knockout that, am I wrong in thinking Willie Monroe can go the distance here?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if there's an upset. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an upset because I don't think Billy Joe Saunders is taking Willie Monroe seriously. I think Billy Joe Saunders picked Willie Monroe as an opponent, even though Willie Monroe is ranked in the WBO, and I think that's the only sanctioning body he's ranked in. He could have fought Daniel Jacobs, but the reason he chose Willie Monroe is because Willie Monroe can't punch, and even if the fight goes the distance, he's most likely going to get the decision. That's point blank, period. And if he sleeps on Willie Monroe will outbox him. He might not get the nod on the judges' scorecards, but everybody will see it live and in color, just like his last fight. So that's my take.
Anybody else want to comment?
Oh,
definitely. I agree. Billy Joe Saunders, because you know me, I'm not really big on either guy, but the thing is that I interviewed Donnell Bone, who told us, and I know this for a fact from hearing Willie Monroe said, he wants another shot at Gennady Golovkin. So I'm actually rooting for Willie because whoever wins Canelo and Gennady will probably get a chance to, become undisputed or pick up that belt that's been hiding down there. So, but I just want to say to Gus, two things. I want to say one thing to Gus. Gus, you're absolutely right. When I heard Ward and Callum and them talking about Estrada, I had to look at my TV like, these motherfuckers know boxing? You don't know who Estrada is talking like that? I actually had to do that. And but yeah, Willie Monroe, I don't know if he can win. The only thing is, I don't know if he can win a 12-round decision. I don't know if he can win a 12-round decision. That's my only thing that kind of worries me. I don't know if he can win a 12, if they'll let him win a 12-round decision. I hope he do it because I know he'll fight tonight.
Oh, we should get into this in many, many ways. Like we talked about the lack of punching power. We talked about but ultimately, this is going to want to be one of the factors in the fight. And let's put it bluntly, his real name is Billy Ho. Billy Ho Saunders is a counterpuncher. He's more of a boxer than a puncher. Guess what? So is Willie Monroe. Willie Monroe is more of a counterpuncher, so that the decision is going to be who's going to take the lead. And I could see a scenario where Saunders turns into the lead and allows Willie Monroe to counterpunch pretty well. And there's a chance because that you could definitely see an upset here because number one, they said I don't trust Billy Ho, and number two, Frank Warren apparently has been burning some bridges with the British Boxing Board of Control. So there may be some British judges that look at things a little bit differently now. But there's definitely room for an upset. Unfortunately, even if Monroe wins and fights the winner Canelo Triple G, the winner unfortunately will not be undisputed because of Canelo being hard-headed. But I'm going to leave that for the main event.
I heard you was trying to chime in, Gus. I had some background. Are you want to comment on this one?
Yeah, I was just going to say, old charismatic Carpio just couldn't wait to get in. He's now customary belligerent UK bashing, but yeah, the fight, mighty, is highly curious matchmaking. You're talking two southpaws with a very similar style. Fighters who do not prefer to lead. They prefer to fight on the back foot, if not counter punching. So this could be a horrible stalemate. It's going to be interesting to see who initiates the lead, because somebody's going to have to. Otherwise, the crowd are going to be booing after about 30 seconds of no action. Now we know Billy Joe. Just one of the most hilarious characters out there. It could be the time where this whole chaos between him and making weights, him and the situation with his trainers. But we've seen a Billy Joe who's moved away from Hatfield, his family, and is actually, after a brief stint with Adam Booth, he left Adam Booth as well. So he's been living actually opposite Brendan Ingle in Sheffield. And they've been quite kind to Bill. What Billy has historically done, Mike, is that he's always gone out with, fellow travelers community. He'll always go out for a game of snooker. Now, he doesn't drink, but he'll have like a couple of pints of Pepsi and a few Mars bars. So that is how his weight has historically ballooned. So his training camps have just specifically been weight cutting camps where he's cutting 40, 50 pounds. He's got black bin liners around his pot belly, looking like an embarrassment when he's out running on the streets like that. But yeah, he's had a pretty decent training camp. Half of it of which was in Spain with Tyson Fury, and the other half over here with Brendan Ingle. So he's got himself in good shape. But getting yourself in shape is not a prerequisite to having a decent performance. And I don't know whether Billy Joe, understands that concept. You just can't rely on your natural talent all the time. And he doesn't have a significant amount of talent. He is a very good boxer. But, ill discipline and all of this will eventually catch up with you. And Willie Monroe ain't no joke. He can fight. And when it comes in the trenches, he fought Gennady within the pocket. When he stopped moving, he came inside him and started trading with him, and actually got Gennady's respect as well with some good uppercuts. So, it ain't going to be an easy fight for Billy Joe.
Yeah, excuse me, but Willie Monroe is one of the fighters who actually showed no fear in Triple G.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, what concerned me in Billy Joe's last performance, Mike, was that Billy Joe's, one of his strongest attributes is his punch accuracy. And in that fight, he was just missing far too many shots. Now, we know Akimov, had very good. He was going between the Philly shuffle, shoulder roll. He had very good upper body movement. So that's a good combination to evade a lot of punches. But even still, when Billy was actually, walking him down, had him on the ropes, he was still missing a hell of a lot of punches, and that clearly shows disharmony there between the fighter, both physically and mentally. So, you can just toss a coin what sort of Billy Joe we're going to get, Mike. Could be a very, very difficult fight. But even still, he'll get the decision, even if it's close on the cards, Mike. This sort of situation between Frank and the the British Boxing Board of Control isn't necessarily about the judges on those Box Nation cards, because a lot of those judges have to be signed off by the British Boxing Board of Control anyway, so they have oversight of those judges. So ultimately, if it comes down to a wrong decision, then it's very much their fault, not the specific promoter's fault. But I think we're going to get a blend of sort of European and sort of British judges. That's how it's always historically been. I don't know if we were going to get any US judges, so this fight could go either way, Mike. I simply don't know.
Excuse me, I had it on mute. Start of the the Super Middleweight tournament begins Saturday. Callum Smith fighting a guy by the name of Skoglund. Uh, I don't know much about Callum Smith's opponent. I'm just throwing the fight out there. Anybody wants to discuss this in any length, or should we go on? And I guess that mute means we should go on. Let's start focusing on the Canelo Triple G card. I'm going to you on this one, Gail, because I want to focus on Jojo Diaz. He was initially supposed to fight Jorge Lara. Lucky for him, in my opinion, that Lara had to drop out due to a back injury. He's fighting a guy by the name of Rivera in the interim. But I've been hearing from some Twitter chatter, Gail, that Jojo Diaz may not be in the best of shape, may be overweight coming into this fight. Have you heard anything being out there in Vegas?
Well, as luck would have it, I talked to Jojo Diaz face-to-face about 3-4 hours ago. Wearing a fine new pair of Gucci slides, I might add. I dropped a dime or two or 900 on here in Vegas. Thank you very much. He looked confident. He looked good. It's tough to tell about the weight issue. I've asked around. I've heard differing things. But I think he'll squeak by. I think he'll make it. However, he might not be so lucky to have dropped Lara in favor of Rivera.
Yeah,
Rivera is no joke.
Yeah, he's undefeated. And correct me if I'm wrong, Gail, but didn't this guy beat Vasquez Jr. A couple of years back?
Yes, he certainly did. He's got a few other significant wins on his record. He's undefeated, and you never know sometimes what's coming out of the fight scene in northern Mexico, particularly Baja, Mexico, Tijuana. There's enough local talent. Yeah, I mean, they could just have fights there. Hell, they could fight every weekend if they want. He's had 25 fights, and whether or not all his opponents have been top tier, somebody with that much ring experience, comes in with a little, a few extra tools in the toolkit. Jojo's going to have to strike early, in my opinion, because the longer it goes, I think the worse it goes for him in this case with a tough guy. It reminds me in circumstances a lot, not saying it that the fighters themselves are similar, but it hasn't been so many months ago since Gabe Rosado fought a complete unknown from Tijuana named Gutierrez, and his first name escapes me now, and nobody knew anything about him. Gutierrez won that fight. I don't care whether the judges gave it to Rosado or not. Everyone at StubHub, and Jacob, if you were there, chime in, please. I can't recall.
Completely agree.
Yeah, Gutierrez won that fight. Absolutely. I think we could see that being the one big upset of the card this weekend.
Anybody else want to comment about this Jojo Diaz fight? I think I said it before, when the opponent was Lara, I thought he was going to get beat, no doubt about it. But he's fighting this Rivera now. I think he's a tough opponent. Anybody else want to talk about this quickly?
Sure. Yeah, I'm disappointed. Heartbroken. Because this was the only lot I was fucking Jorge Lara. I hear about him, but I'm disappointed because, and I do agree that this is boxing, so we don't know what I. I'm not gonna act like I knew this much, so this is news to me about him having wins. This was the fight for me with Lara, and I was like, this guy, he's the good. I knew Jorge Lara was gonna just really get to him, but I can see an upset happening because also in boxing, this close to a fight, you prepared for one guy, and then 3 days before a fight, you have a whole new guy thrown in front of you. You take time to find some things out. with the pressers and the meetings and the weigh-ins. So I do agree there could be an upset here in the making.
Let's not forget, though, that Rivera was the original opponent that Golden Boy wanted to get for JoJo for this fight. The main reason that they went after they had to get Lara is because Lara was ranked higher by the WBC. Remember, this is a WBC title eliminator. The winner of this fight becomes the mandatory for Gary Russell Jr. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic going into it because JoJo was going to get one of these guys sooner or later, and it should tell you probably the confidence that Golden Boy has in JoJo Diaz to throw him in against deep water like this. With a fight that pretty much a good amount of people, when it was not picking him to lose, and Rivera is probably going to fight, he's going to have to really earn the victory. But it shows you, like I said, it shows you the confidence that they have, and it'll actually put Golden Boy and Al Heyman in a very peculiar situation because it'll be the first time, I think, in a while where the Golden Boy fighter will be the mandatory for a Heyman fighter. The other times we've seen it, it's been the other way around. So we're definitely going to see something happen. It would not surprise me if Rivera won. Rivera's not coming in particularly on days' notice. After he thought he was lost to JoJo fight, he had his fight scheduled for the week afterwards. So he's been in training camp. And ultimately, this is going to be probably the test you're going to see of JoJo Diaz. Is he world caliber or not?
Indeed.
Just if I can.
Go ahead, Jacob. Go ahead.
Gail, it was Antonio was the name of the fighter. Just as a quick side note.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And he did win that fight.
And he did absolutely win that fight.
And you know what? JoJo Diaz, I've seen him fight quite a few times live, and I've never really been impressed with him. And I remember when they were talking about Valdez was going to have a tough, if they were going to match them up, that, a lot of people were picking Diaz. So I think, he is kind of a little bit ripe for the picking in an upset here. He to me, he doesn't have punching power, and he moves around pretty well, but I think if you can hurt him or outdo him in activity, you can win a fight. But granted, this is on a Golden Boy promoted card in Vegas, and we know what happens sometimes on these cards. Just like with when Canelo fought Mayweather, he got a 114 score. So don't be surprised if some kind of crazy scores are like that are read.
Let's move on to the main event here. I'm going to start the conversation off with you, Natty. Look, Canelo Alvarez, Gennady Golovkin. It's finally happening. Basically 2 years in the making. Fights happening this Saturday on HBO. Big pay-per-view bout. One of the biggest bouts in the year here stateside. Your keys to the fight. Who do you have winning?
Well, let me just start by saying this. The popular thought out here is Golovkin is now right for the picking based on what Danny Jacobs did in Madison Square Garden a few months ago. Golovkin has been exposed. I think I was one of the only guys that actually picked Danny Jacobs to win that fight, which I believe he did, but that's neither here nor there. You know what I'm saying? The reason Golovkin looked like that against Danny Jacobs is because of Danny Jacobs' movement, his length, reach, his speed, combination punching, his ability to switch and give Golovkin different looks. You know what I'm saying? He had certain physical advantages in there that allowed that fight to look the way it did. These are things that Canelo does not have. Canelo is used to fighters that stand there and let him hit them and get off combination punches. When he's in there with people who move, he's not that effective. Now, this guy, he's adept at stalking. He has tremendous punching power. You know what I mean? He has a piston-like jab. You know what I mean? He can break you down to the body. He's not the fastest guy out there, but he showed that he could be defensively responsible if he needs to be, like he did against David Lemieux. You know what I'm saying? But to make a long story short, I think that Canelo in this fight is biting off a little more than he can chew. And I have Gennady Golovkin winning this fight by a late TKO, probably within 10th or 11th round.
Follow-up question. I'm going to ask you this on purpose.
Go for it.
I've been hearing a prevailing theory that if the fight is close in any way, that Canelo is going to pull it out. Do you see that kind of scenario happening?
It's happened before. I mean, why wouldn't it? It was just mentioned a while ago about the 14-14 score against Floyd Mayweather. Right? That's ridiculous. I think everybody on this panel would agree with that, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? Look at the Eris Landy Lara fight. Look at the Austin Trout fight. Even if you believe that Canelo won those fights, these guys were behind the 8 ball from the get-go. Those were 117, 118s. I mean, in the Trout fight, I don't think there's a judge that didn't give Trout 1 round. So I wouldn't be surprised if the fight goes the distance. And even though everybody sees that Golovkin wins the fight, I wouldn't be surprised if it goes in Canelo's favor. Of course not. But I don't think Golovkin is going to leave it in the hands of the judges. Not at all.
Okay, I'll go to you, Gus. Your keys. What are you looking for from both Canelo and Triple G?
You know, Natty makes some excellent points, Mike, both strategy-wise and the politics-wise. Gennady, yes, hasn't fought in front of that Nevada Boxing Commission, and he's firmly the B side of fight. The crowd is going to be 99.8% Mexican as well. So it's not favorable for him on points. But in terms of the fight, Mike, now, they say a wise man knows his limitations. And I sincerely believe Gennady Golovkin acknowledges his limitations. Now, when we look at the Daniel Jacobs fight, Mike, contrary to the perception of most people, and it was interesting that HBO actually uploaded the fight in HD on their website, so I got a good chance to see it clearly and properly. You know, Daniel Jacobs was not moving or running as all of these as what, you know, appears to be the general consensus for large spurts of the fight. He actually was standing in front of Golovkin and fighting him, and he was actually goading him on at times. But Gennady, we know, does not exchange punches, and I think he understands his limitations. He doesn't have the hand speed, so generally, you know, he will not commit to punching with the fighter because, you know, that's a high risk equation in his head. So he will cover up, and he could only really retaliate with jabs and right hands. And we saw that against Mike, adopting more of a boxer psychology in the fight with David Lemieux. Now, Lemieux is reckless, off balance, we know, quite erratic. But Gennady knew that this guy possesses one-punch knockout power. Now, and you can just hit that punch, and sometimes you just won't even see it coming because how unorthodox he is. Gennady probably realized he could actually step in and stop the guy a lot quicker if he collapsed the pocket. But it was a risk he wasn't prepared to address. So he opted for strategy and fighting behind his jab. And in hindsight, it was the correct strategy. Once he began to, break him down, frustrate him with that thunderbolt of a jab, then you could eventually, once he became a little bit more ragged, taking just trying to pot shot from distance when he couldn't negate the distance, that's when Gennady began, to step up his offense, hit him with those body shots when he was trying to move, etc. So, and we know history tells us that, great fights, mega fights, generally come down to strategy. And Gennady, I think, will probably go back to utilizing that jab, Mike. If he tries to hunt Canelo down as that's his customary hunting, stalking, predatory sort of instincts, he could be in some trouble, because I think he knows that Canelo possesses the hand speed. And I think Canelo's hand speed is comparable with Jacob's. I'm not sure who's the quicker. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's roughly comparable. Maybe Canelo's punch placement is a little bit better. Jacob's at time, his punches were a little, I wouldn't say slappy, but some of the left hooks he was hitting him with later on were flush and hard. So that guy can punch, and he was a huge guy as well. Coming in at a very about 180 pounds or whatever it was. So I think Gennady will fight behind his jab, and I think that's the right strategy. But this is where, Mike, I could be grossly mistaken, but from the clips I've seen of Canelo, Mike, hitting the bags, pads, shadow boxing, he looks mentally and physically fatigued, Mike. I could see some frustration in the way he was punching, complaining with, Eddie and Chepo and that. He just looked slightly overcooked, Mike. And if we look at the whole scenario, he's had two mega fights back to back, two huge pay-per-views. The fight with Chavez, it must have been mentally draining, because that fight was just talked about non-stop, for 6 years. And we know that the negotiation process and the international press tour of this fight was protracted, to say the least. So, I think when you factor in both of those, Mike, I think Canelo, and we know Gennady was actually quite well rested, Mike. He came back at his 30-day check weight. He was 170 pounds, which is okay. Just I know he had a little injury as well, but I think he was very well rested. Came in a little bit heavier, but that's nothing wrong with that. I think he's fully recharged. So if my prognostications has absolutely any merit, I think Canelo's energy will deplete slightly more rapidly, and that's going to be exacerbated by taking punches from a guy who hits harder than something he's never ever experienced before, and also the mental pressure that Gennady exerts upon his opponents with his relentless stalking and pressure and his punch resistance, because the guy definitely has a chin. Jacobs can crack, and Gennady took those punches reasonably well. So I'm off the feeling, Mike, that Gennady will probably win the fight comfortably, excluding what the judges are saying. But I think he'll fight a little bit more cautiously, definitely behind his jab, and I think he'll win it'll be probably close on the cards, but it'll be much wider in reality, because we know the judges are definitely going to favor Canelo and give him any opportunity to retain those titles. So I'll say Golovkin on points, Mike.
Your keys to the fight, Dad.
watching the 24/7s, watching just how this is going to play out. To me, it's going to be an interesting fight because Gus mentioned it. The hand speed is going to play a factor into it. Canelo is a fighter that when he throws combinations, you know there's a body punch somewhere. It doesn't matter beginning, middle, or end. There's a body punch in there somewhere. So he's able to throw those off, and he is more of a counter puncher, which may suit him against Golovkin, who is known to be a good stalker, which is why, luckily, Mr. Nat Turner pointed out, like, he probably should do the jab to start in the fight. Here's where I think they're starting messing up, and this is probably me listening to Abel Sanchez. Abel Sanchez might be making the same mistake Freddie Roach did when they had the Canelo Cotto fight. It was pretty evident that Freddie Roach was preparing for the Canelo that lost to Floyd. And it turned out he was fighting a fighter that was better than the guy that lost to Floyd. Abel Sanchez is, and by the way he's talking about the sparring matches, he thinks he may be facing the Canelo that was doing those sparring matches with Gennady Golovkin 5 years ago. And probably forgetting that Canelo's improved since then. Now, luckily for him, like I said, Gennady is a young mid-30s. He hasn't faced a lot of punishment. And he, like I said, he has insane punching power, even countering. Nobody's going to forget that counter he got from Daniel Gill after he got punched. But to me, I think I'm probably going to go with Canelo. I'm going Canelo razor thin. I see this fight in a sense where there's going to be one knockdown. It wouldn't surprise me if there's a knockdown for each man. But I think probably Canelo's going to pull it off because, unfortunately, it is true. This is the first time Triple G's fighting in Vegas. And with Kenny Bayless being the referee and with Adelaide Bird being one of the judges, you can expect some unpredictability. But I expect Canelo to pull it off, but probably by the thinnest of margins. But it'll be a good enough fight where we can all say, all right, next May, let's do it again.
Shout out to Doodle Brown. Shout out to Doodle Brown in the chat room commenting on the fight. She says that either Canelo succumbs to Triple G's power or Canelo wins by a body shot. And she went on to say, if that's the case, Canelo has a country behind him, but Triple G is the bigger fighter, and HBO loves him. So, yeah, shout out to Doodle Brown in the chat room. Shout out to What You Need as well. Glad to hear from you. I hope you're doing good over there in Trinidad. I hope the hurricane didn't do too much damage to you and your people. What You Need says that Canelo is going to beat Triple G in convincing style. Says it will be a bad beating, and Triple G's defense is not tight. Defense wins fights. I'll go to you, Gail. Being out there in Vegas, what's the word amongst your colleagues? What's the vibe that you get from them regarding this fight? And what's your personal keys to the fight?
Well, interesting that we are already split on this panel, and that we've been talking about the preparation lead up and the trainers. The last event today in the media center was a roundtable with the trainers, and Abel Sanchez and Chepo and Eddie Reynoso sat together, I mean, literally shoulder to shoulder, side by side, and answered questions for a group of about 40 media, including me. And I asked the gentleman, are you concerned if this fight goes to the judges' scorecards? Are you concerned if that happens? Abel Sanchez said, yes, I'm concerned. And then he was very careful not to impugn the reputation of any particular judges or insult anybody. But he made it very clear that he would much prefer the outcome be in their hands. And then we look over at Eddie Reynoso, who says, I'm not concerned at all. That says something to me very important, that if it gets tough in the early going and Canelo decides that he needs to leave it in the judges' hands, he'd prefer to take his chances with the judges than with Golovkin. It's very interesting. And I think they're right on target. Having said that, no matter who favors Golovkin or Canelo in this fight, the agreement in the media center is whoever controls the fight early will win the fight. Whoever controls the ring, whoever gets to their other man, no matter how it's done, that's your winner of the fight. Everyone does think it's going into deep water. Nobody thinks it's going to end early. Nobody thinks there's going to be a one-round, lights out punch. Nothing like we saw with Chocolatito. Most of the observers feel there will be a stoppage, but it's going to be one of those accumulated damage, grinded out types of stoppages in the late round. Golovkin was in the betting a favorite up until today. Someone that we don't know put in a very large bet on Canelo. A very large bet.
Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah. Tip the odds a little bit. That's always interesting when you're in Vegas to watch what's going on in the sports book. So now we get down to my opinion. I think this is such a 50-50 fight at this point, until we have an outcome, we're all right. Nobody's opinion, no matter what they go for, is going to be so far off center line that we could laugh at it. I mean, except for that, first round lights out punch, I think's off the table. Now watch me be proven wrong. But I think that the weapon that Golovkin has that Canelo doesn't is the jab. I agree. I think he'll fight behind the jab, just like he did with Lemieux. We saw for our own eyes how much damage that can do. We just watched Inoue do exactly the same thing. And as I was watching the Inoue fight, I'm thinking to myself, this is what I need to see Golovkin do a week from now. And not just break Canelo down, but demoralize him. Take the fight out of him. Take the spitfire out of him by keeping him at bay. And that's what we saw happen to Lemieux, who does have terrific one-punch power, but the same way Canelo does. But once Golovkin held him at bay and bloodied him good, he just didn't have it to throw. I really see a very, very similar fight to that one. To me, that's the blueprint for what needs to happen, and I think will happen on Saturday.
Okay, everything in me says that Triple G should have the advantage. I think he's the bigger fighter. I think he's the more powerful fighter. To Gail's point, I think if he can establish the jab and do so early, I think Canelo is in trouble. And I wonder how will Canelo take Triple G's punch, because he has not faced a fighter with the power that Golovkin brings to the table. Conversely, if Canelo can take his punch, if Canelo can establish his own jab, and if Canelo can get to Triple G's body, I wonder how Triple G reacts. In my mind, Triple G should win, but call me crazy here. Something in me tells me that Canelo is going to get the decision here. But if it's close, I think for Triple G to win, he has to dominate the entire way. He has to stop him or score some knockdowns in a decision win. But something tells me that Canelo is going to win, and we're going to see a second and possibly third fight here. I'll go to you, Jacob. Your thoughts, and then we can finish things off with you, Bo.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely no way Triple G gets a decision in Vegas. Canelo is arguably the kind of the reigning, if you want to call it, superstar. Actually, you know what? I take that back. Anthony Joshua is the new superstar because he's selling 70,000 tickets and whatnot. But
Yeah, I heard De La Hoya on First Take, and I caught that he was talking about how Canelo is it's the fighter from a money perspective. No, as long as you got that big dude over in the UK, winning like he's winning, he's the future global star. But proceed, Jacob.
yeah, and I actually think that Canelo. I'm not the biggest Canelo fan, but he has improved. I can admit that. And but what kind of gets me is this what I would call overrated power that he supposedly has. If I go through his recent career, he fought a faded Mosley, but didn't knock him out. Austin Trout he knocked down in the 7th round, but couldn't finish him. A faded Angulo didn't knock him down. It was stopped by the ref. I mean, he was still, he's getting his ass kicked, but he was still coming. A chinny Kirkland who can get knocked out by a feather duster. Cotto, who he was 20 pounds bigger than, and Cotto's been hurt before, and he didn't seem to hurt him in that fight, and he did land some hard punches. Amir Khan, who's a career welterweight, of course, it was just a matter of time him getting hit in the chin, and then you got Chavez. The Smith was a legit knockdown, but Chavez, Chavez didn't put up any offense, and he couldn't put him down. So I think this mystique of Canelo's superpower that he's crushing people, I think is a little overstated. On the flip side of that, you got Golovkin, who I also think has overrated power in the sense that he doesn't like knock guys out like lights out. He kind of wears guys down and eventually, gets a stoppage or eventually they don't want it anymore. I would say Canelo has the better resume as far as names, but to me, the better wins lie on the side of Triple G. I think a lot of people, in that Jacobs fight, I had Jacobs winning that fight, and I'm a Triple G fan, but I clearly had Jacobs winning that fight. He didn't get awarded the fight, be that as it may. Jacobs, I think a lot of people forget, that was also a very close 50-50 fight. And Jacobs is a very, very good fighter. I think Jacobs fights Canelo, he beats him. And he'll beat him convincingly. But I don't think that fight's ever going to happen for obvious reasons. But, Jacobs, even in that fight, did something that Canelo is going to do on Saturday, which is come in a lot heavier than Golovkin. So I do think that Canelo is going to be the bigger man in weight, because Golovkin doesn't tend to blow up, too much. He stays pretty close to his weight. But Jacobs, we know, came in heavier, and Golovkin has an advantage in the jab, in my opinion. Canelo can get hit by the jab quite a bit. If he can use that blueprint of what he did to Lemieux to use the jab and also to use it to set up his punches. He has a very good piston-like jab, very similar to how Charlo's jab has a lot of power behind it. I think that would be the best strategy to use. And, with the Miguel Cotto fight, Cotto had his moments in that fight. I just think that he was too small to his punches just weren't having the effect on Canelo. A lot of people forget that Golovkin does do a lot of body punching also. So, a lot of people talk about Canelo, bodying people and whatnot, but Golovkin is very good to the body also. And we also know that Golovkin can take a pretty good shot. I think it was mentioned earlier, Jacobs has a good punch. Lemieux has a good punch. Stevens has a good punch, and he was able to take those punches. Canelo, he has been hurt before by Jose Miguel Cotto, I believe, in the first round. And he has seen him get tired or take rounds off in certain parts of the fight. But with a person like Golovkin, who kind of keeps on coming forward and keeps on putting the pressure and doesn't let you breathe, that could be one of his undoings. But at the end of the day, I think, Golovkin knows that he's not going to win a decision, and, regardless of how the fight goes, and he has to convincingly beat Canelo. I do think that Golovkin is towards the end of his career, potentially. He's getting, a little bit long in the tooth, and his performances of late haven't been as spectacular. So, it would be smart to him to, do what he needs to do to win this fight. All this talk between the trainers, like all that bullshit about, they didn't want to, destroy Jacobs because it wasn't given the Canelo fight. I think that's all horseshit. Jacobs is a good fighter. It was a tough fight. But, Sanchez isn't going to be the one fighting. At the end of the day, it's going to be Canelo versus Golovkin. And in those 3 minutes, they're going to have to, be in their own head and being able to capitalize on the other's mistake. So I'm picking Triple G by late stoppage. And I hope it's not controversial. I don't know that we're going to get, 2 or 3 fights out of this. Potentially this could be a very damaging night for Golden Boy if their golden ticket, Canelo, gets knocked out badly or gets stopped. And Joseph Diaz also, gets upset because they don't have a lot in their cupboard to go to. So I just hope it's a good and a fair fight. And I'm disappointed by the whole IBF thing with the weight. So hopefully Canelo doesn't come in too heavy, but maybe that'll be a deterrent.
I'm going to finish off this discussion with both from truth and facts, your analysis of the fight. Your breakdown, of the fight.
Yeah. About to have a breakdown here in this house. My daughter's trying to go hands with me up in here.
Oh, boy. Oh, dear.
This is what I love about boxing. When you get a panel, everybody got different opinions. You learn something. I'm picking Canelo Alvarez, and this is the reason why. I don't believe Jacobs is able to go 12. Jacobs is able to take a shot, and Canelo isn't able to do so as well. Canelo Alvarez also he's a better counterpuncher than Gennady Golovkin. Canelo Alvarez can punch in between the combinations, which is something Gennady Golovkin has to wait for you to stop your offense, then reset to resume. So keys to victory. I'm just gonna do my keys to victory for both guys. Canelo Alvarez is gonna have to use his counterpunching, go to the body, okay, and always be first. Being second against Gennady Golovkin turns into L's. So always be. Canelo Alvarez ring IQ has finally caught up to his talent. So he's ready. What Canelo Alvarez cannot do, he cannot get caught on the ropes. When you get Golovkin is very good at closing that gap when he sees you're about to hit that rope. When he sees your back foot about to hit that rope, he jumps on you. He's very good at that. So Canelo Alvarez cannot get caught on the rope. Canelo Alvarez cannot let Gennady Golovkin get into a groove. When Gennady Golovkin gets into a good, comfortable groove, it's over. And the one thing Canelo Alvarez can't do is he can't let Golovkin control more of the moments per round. He has to be the one to control more of that. So I think from an experience standpoint, from being in there with the Trouts, being in there with the Laudas, being in there with the Floyds, albeit we can question all of those. And I agree, we can question it because I think the Trout fight only changed because it was open scoring, and when Trout saw what the score was, he changed the way he fought, which played more into Canelo's hands. So those are the things for Canelo. For Gennady Golovkin, his jab. If he has to use that jab often and consistently. I mean, I think Gennady Golovkin should test Canelo Alvarez's body. See, because Canelo Alvarez, we know he sometimes cut weight pretty hard. He cuts weight pretty. I'm not gonna say hard, but he has a hard time with his weight sometimes. So test his body. See if that youthful energy of his is still going to be fresh and ready. And Gennady Golovkin can't allow Canelo Alvarez to control the pace, so he can't do that. So I like to fight both all the way around. I agree with everybody. This is a 50-50 fight. It's finally good to see a fight like this where you can make valid points to where you think one guy win, the other guy win. And I agree with Jacobs for them talking about, oh well, we let Jake. I do agree with Daniel about them talking about some Jacobs letting Jacobs. Girl, stop. Talk about some letting Jacobs hitting him. No, I agree with you. They wasn't doing that. He just did it. But it's a very good fight, and I believe it's going to come down to number one. If Canelo Alvarez really can take Gennady Golovkin's power, if he can take Gennady Golovkin's power, then he has a very high chance of winning. And it's going to come down to number two is Gennady Golovkin going to show us something we've never seen before. We've never seen him go to the body. We've never seen him counterpunch. We've never seen him exactly move his head. Those things differently. That could probably offset Canelo Alvarez's game plan. I don't think from a mental aspect you're going to break down either one of these guys. I think Canelo Alvarez is mentally tough as he's probably going to be at this point. So I'm liking this fight. I just can't wait for it to happen.
And I think we're going to shut the show down on that note. I want to thank What You Need. It's been a long time since I've heard from him. He's in the chat. Joe said it's the truth. Joe said it's true, excuse me. Doodoo Brown, Sean, Abid. I want to thank all of them for joining us in the chat. Plenty of comments, lively conversation, lively back and forth between Joe said it's true and What You Need in particular regarding this fight. Hope to have you back. Need to get you back on the show, What You Need. I'm just putting it out there for you. Want to thank everybody who joined me on the show tonight. Going around the panel here. Started with you, Mr. Natty Turner. Been a while since you've been on Pound for Pound Boxing Report. For those who want to talk the sweet science or anything else with you, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, man. What you see here, Mr. Natty Turner 1 is the YouTube page. Blackbird Sugar Boxing. Blackbird Sugar on Twitter. Natty Turner on Facebook, man. Holla at me.
Indeed.
One more thing I want to say before I leave regarding this fight. Well, I forgot to mention that Canelo cannot fight 3 minutes of every round. So if Gennady Golovkin forces him to fight 3 minutes of every round, he has a better chance of getting that KO. So that's it.
Indeed. I hope you have you back on the show soon. Gus from Corruption in Boxing, for folks who want to talk the sweet science, for folks who want to talk music, let them know where to hit you up.
Yeah, Mike, thank you. Always a pleasure. Respect all of the panelists as well. Nice catching up with Natty again. It's been too long.
What up, Gus?
Yeah, you can just catch me Corruption in Boxing, all platforms, Mike. Doing a lot more music recently, a lot of critical reviews, especially electronic music. I'm writing for Beatport and Juno and the labels in Japan and in Holland and now in Colombia as well. Got a dedicated channel, Covert Operative. Alternatively, go onto the website to see my reviews. Peace.
Indeed. And speaking of music, I got to make sure to send you that new Action Bronson while it's on my mind, Daddy. Go to you, Jacob from Jab Hook. For folks who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk music, let them know where to hit you up.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for having me on the show again, as always, and the always esteemed panel. I love being on this show. Best show on in my opinion, on
Appreciate it. Thanks.
On the internet, and everybody's so knowledgeable. And like I say, I think I learn something every time when I talk and hear everybody's breakdowns. But I could be found at JRATM23 on Twitter, Instagram, and at jabhookboxing.com. I'm starting to get back into writing for that, and recorded I do like to talk movies a lot, so I watch a lot of movies. I just recorded a podcast not too long ago that should be out in the next few weeks or so, and I'm going to New York next week to record another one for work. So I'll actually be in New York and then Greensboro, North Carolina. So I'll be closer to you, Michael, but not quite as close.
Yeah, that's about a good 2-3 hours away. And that's a good 2-3 hours away from where I'm at. Gail from Communities Digital News out there in Vegas. with the folks for Triple G and Canelo. For folks who want to talk the sweet science, for folks who want to talk Game of Thrones, for folks who want to talk environmental issues, let them know where to hit you up.
You will find my fight coverage in addition to the Pound Report, of course, on Community's digital news, which is COM, COMM, Digi, D-I-G-I News, comdiginews.com. We've got full fight coverage. I have just posted an article tonight with video interviews with the undercard fighters, specifically talked to Jojo Diaz, Randy Caballero, and Ryan Martin, who I think is going to be the class of the night. And you'll get to know some of those folks. We also have 2 ladies bouts on the undercard, I might add, Marlon Esparza and the American debut of Nicola Adams from Yorkshire. So
Nice.
very excited to see her. She was here today. And apparently most of my colleagues have gone off to the bar.
And speaking of women's boxing, I have to give this little bit of news here. Katie Taylor, getting a world title shot. UK
Yes.
women's fighter. She's getting a title shot on the Joshua Pulev undercard. So I just wanted to put that note out there. So there you go.
So, and for everybody that's got questions or anything you want to know, hit me on Twitter. I've been here, seen all the major players, observed everybody. We had the round table with the trainers today, and can answer all your questions.
Indeed. Daniel from the Inscriber, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk the NBA, specifically the Miami Heat, or for those who want to check you out, push back against T-Cots on Twitter, let them know where to find you.
You can find me on Twitter, Raucus99. You're going to find my work at the Inscriber Digital Magazine. And like I said, I do my own podcast with the folks at For Boxing News, Joe and Francis. It was only me and Joe this week. I'm going to put up it later tonight. But we definitely talked about how this fight's going to turn out. And by the way, I do want to make a correction. I think because I remember Gus saying that the fight is that the crowd's probably going to be almost completely Mexican, which gives Canelo an advantage. I'm probably going to say that the Mexican fans will be for Canelo, but the Mexican American fans will be for Triple G.
Interesting. Last but not least, both from Truth and Facts Boxing. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to follow the adventures of you and your daughter, you two are hilarious. And for those who want to check you out and your apps, you develop apps as well. Let them know where to hit you up.
Yeah, you can find me right here on this. And I do agree with Jacob's great podcast, great panel. And I also
Appreciate it, brother. Appreciate it.
Regardless of how much I know, I always learn something, which is always great. You can also find me on my program, Truth and Facts About Boxing. I just want to say a quick message to Floyd Mayweather. J. Leon Love and Nikki Bey are not Showtime fighters. They're FS1 fighters. Stop pretending with these guys. Okay?
Well, there's a lot to be a little bit annoyed about Floyd, given what he just said recently, but that's for another show.
So I just wanted to tell, because it hurt in my eyes to see J. Leon Love on television. It really did. But you can also find me at Twitter at capital T for Truth _ capital F for Factbox1, Instagram Truth _ Factbox1, and the Movement Podcast. And when I get a chance, I also join Daniel. And shout out to Jacob. He wrote a great article that we all got to read. It was great. I enjoyed it. And I always enjoy anything Gail writes, especially her tributes for her love for Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.
You're lucky
Thanks,
she's
Bo.
on mute. You're lucky she's on mute.
I'm restraining myself. Hey, he showed up, by the way, ringside for Superfly last week.
Yeah.
It's a good thing he didn't cross my path.
Yeah, talk about he's gonna fight November, December. Yeah, right.
Yeah, bullshit. Whatever.
Yeah, I see Senior was still there, so it was good to see him. Also,
I seen you just showed up here tonight about an hour ago, at least visibly, anyway.
There's another fight this week. Fury and Joseph.
That's next week. That's on the 23rd.
Okay. So I'm glad to hear Nicola is going to get a shot. Man, this is the best time for me is when I'm doing this show with you guys. Man, I love it.
And where can folks find your apps? Where can folks find your app?
Outside of doing oh, my daughter's looking at me, so she made sure I said outside of hanging with her. So I got to make sure I say that. You can find my apps. You can go to the Play Store and type in Apollonia Media. Yes, for Purple Rain, Apollonia, APOLLONIA and those are our games.
I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that at all. For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk music, or for those who want to talk fitness, I'm in the fitness game right now. Preparing my first challenge group, either at the end of this month or early next month. My first fitness challenge. So yeah, if you want to follow me talking about all those things, you can follow me personally on Twitter, Brother JR. At Brother JR76, as I stated to begin the show. If you want to find out all things pound for pound boxing report, P4P Boxing Report.wordpress.com. That's the blog. Check the right page. You'll find links to the pages and channels G+, YouTube, Tumblr, Twitter. Also links to where to listen to us: SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Player FM, Stitcher Radio, Mixcloud, and also the links to my fitness stuff as well. On the next episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, we will do a recap of Canelo Triple G. We will do a recap of Saunders, Monroe, the Joseph Diaz fight, and we will do a preview of all the boxing that's happening on the 22nd, 23rd. Loaded boxing these next couple of weeks. Oscar Valdez is going to be fighting on the 22nd on ESPN. Zurdo Ramirez fighting Jesse Hart on the undercard. That's going to be in Tucson. On the 23rd, Linares is going to fight Luke Campbell in Inglewood. Yeah, in Inglewood. Second fight of the Cruiserweight tournament. Dorticos is fighting Kudrasov. That fight is going to be in San Antonio. Nonino Donaire is going to fight on that undercard. Joseph Parker and Huey Fury, who both mentioned, they're going to fight in Manchester. So loaded boxing on the week of the 23rd. So going to preview all of those bouts. So for Mr. Natty Turner, the Blackbird Sugar of this YouTube shit, for both from Truth and Facts, from Gail from Communities Digital News, Gus from Corruption and Boxing, Jacob from Jab Hook, Daniel from The Inscriber. This has been episode 183 of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I'm your host, Michael. We will see you next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Adios.
See you later.
Good night.